Alrighty, welcome everyone. Happy Thursday. Uh, my name is Roland Smith. I'm the client manager for Myriad Services. Joining me today is Graham Lodge, Director and Senior Engineer for Myriad Services. First of all, I just want to say thank you all for attending our webinar today. I hope that you will find this very useful and informative. And hopefully by the end of this webinar, we'll get you all thinking more about how the cloud could take your business everywhere. Now, this webinar, of course, is going to be recorded. So, by the end of it, we will send it to everyone that attended. So please feel free to share it with anyone who might find it useful. And also keep an eye out for future webinars. We will be doing more of these useful, informative webinars for future references as well. So that's my part. So let's get the webinar going. So let me start off with this question, and that is, why do we have an office? So traditionally, we had an office. So is that the reason why we have offices? Or do we have offices because we want to have a business presence in the area for a locally owned, image? Or do we have offices because that's where our clients are and we want to be closer to them? Or maybe because of competitions in the area and you want to have an office to give you that bigger presence? Is it to congregate? Bringing your people together to one location, giving them the feeling of unity, the one team, one family, business family, so that all your departments are under the one roof? Or is it to bring your customers to you, your clients to visit you, or for meetings and presentations at your location? Obviously, communication is key. So maybe that's for your team to communicate better. Your sales team's working closely with maybe your accounts team, or your tech team working closely with your development team, collaborating on projects or working on clients, working on the client project or whatever it may be, or just simply brainstorming and sharing ideas. A place where your team can perhaps socialize and do some team buildings, or maybe just so that the new person joining the company can feel more at welcome, more welcome at a company location. Or to have control, not necessarily control over your team as such, maybe more of a control over workflow. Who does what comes next, getting sign-offs and getting approvals, maybe control over procedures, making sure it's done to company standards, control over maybe company data or information, who has access and who doesn't. Or maybe you just prefer to have company data on site, the control over important data, making sure they are safe and in your hands. Or maybe control over allocation to time, to people, making sure that the right team has it. Or simply just to make sure that your team just shows up to work. So I guess that leads to the next question, and that is, so what do we have in the office? Obviously, you have the meeting rooms, whiteboards, notice boards, photocopiers, printers. We all have our moments. Servers, comm racks, telecommunication hardware, filing cabinets, paper, stationery, staplers. People keep stealing staplers and pens, phones, headset, desk. You get the picture. Okay, so ultimately, an office, those are the tools that makes an office work. So ultimately, an office is just another tool. Okay, so it's just another add-on, but it's no longer a critical tool. And I believe that COVID-19 has proven it to be fairly true. So, what can your business take to the cloud? Now, one of the great things about cloud is that it's very dynamic, and you can host a multitude of platforms in the cloud. So storage, software platform, infrastructure. Look, there are plenty of services, of course, that are out there, like Microsoft Azure, Team, Office 365, AWS, Google, heap of services, okay? But for the purpose of this webinar, I'm going to stick with Microsoft because we are a Microsoft Gold partner, and that's what we want to push, I guess. So let's start with what you can take to the cloud. So the obvious one is servers. So every office has a server or two, or maybe more. And you might have a server for your Exchange or file servers, or a server for your company applications, or maybe a backup server. And we all know that they take space. Okay, you might even have a room dedicated just for them. So it also requires resources like electricity. It's an ongoing, cost. You've got to keep them cool. So an aircon needs to be installed. Then, of course, the maintenance on the aircon and the ongoing electricity costs of having the aircon on. Not to mention regular maintenance and upgrades of your servers. You've got to consider downtime. So these are all costs that are associated with running a server. So what happens if your server fails? What are your redundancy plans? Is it to have more servers? What if they all fail? So these are the things that you have to consider, okay? So why not put them in the cloud, like Microsoft Azure? So by doing that, you're no longer having to, you're no longer responsible for keeping your servers up and running. It falls on Microsoft. And that's just the service that you pay. So they manage, they upgrade, they maintain, and they take care of the ongoing costs, along with the redundancy plans, which they put in place. So let's look at the servers a little bit more in terms of what's in the servers. Okay, so you've got your file system and database, business applications. So you might have a custom app designed specifically for your business, for your team, or maybe a portal for your client. Exchange, you might have a Exchange server. So some businesses still do use that. Now, of course, you could take the whole lot as a complete whole and take it up to Azure, or you could, be smart about it and break it up. So to give you an example, you might have an Exchange server, and you might load it up all or migrate it up to Office 365. Or you may have a file server which you can, put up into a SharePoint, or again, Microsoft Azure file server. Now, with a properly deployed SharePoint, you can have files, folders, homepage, company information, and set it up so you can have all those, search functions, whatnot. And of course, if you have larger files, and some businesses do, you might have CAD drawings as an example. SharePoint and OneDrive and all that, they're going to struggle. So therefore, you can load that up to Azure and have a file server. So ultimately, the Microsoft Azure could be your file server, your app server, terminal servers, whatever it is that you're currently running on physical server right now, you can run it on Microsoft Azure. For business apps, your current software provider like MyOp or SAP, they may already have a cloud version for your key applications. But of course, again, if they don't have it, it's really not a big deal, because you can have these hosted on Azure and continue using it as normal. So you can also eliminate the need for filing cabinets and paper. These can be files that are on your SharePoint, or maybe file server on Azure. Papers can be easily scanned and then stored up into SharePoint. But let's look at paper as an example a little bit more. So most of the paper we use are printed, okay? And we do this because we have a process that we work through. So, for example, invoice, you get it via email, you print it, and then you hand it to the accounts to be processed, and then it gets filed in the filing cabinet. All this can be done and fully automated with a properly set up SharePoint, okay? So again, eliminating the hard processes. So signing paper, contracts, These can all be done on tablets, so you can view it, sign it, send it back, send it via email, or store it straight up into SharePoint. Again, eliminating paper. Whiteboards, notice boards. These can all move up to the cloud. Okay, so as part of Microsoft Office 365 suite, you also get access to the whiteboard. It's a virtual whiteboard. It's a great tool that Microsoft has released. And here you can interact, you can collaborate with your team or whoever you invite to join. And the best part is that they can join in from anywhere in the world, from any computers. Now, the feature that I absolutely love is the fact that you can save it. Once you've interacted with it, you can save it, you can share it, send it via email, store it on Teams, or store it on SharePoint. So again, you don't have to worry about taking the photo and sending it to everyone. Meeting rooms can be in the cloud, and I think COVID-19 has proven that this is just a fact. It can work. And part of the Office 365 suite, it comes with it. It's built with security in mind. You can host meetings with your team, your client, and here you can share your screen, share files, have chats, have private chats within the chat, and collaborate on projects or just interact with your clients. Even your phone, believe it or not, your desk phones can be in the cloud. Now, there are heaps of platforms out there, but for this purpose, we use Microsoft Teams. With the Teams, you can set it up so it makes and receive calls internally or externally. You can also have it set up so it's fully automated, or have a reception desk phone where you can transfer it externally or internally and return the call just like a normal office phone. So you can do a lot. So what are the benefits of going to the cloud? So look, there are many benefits to going to the cloud, which can drive business values. Look, I just want to share a quick overview of some of the benefits. That's time, efficiency, cost. They're all interconnected. And of course, COVID-19 has proven that you can work from anywhere. Okay, your business doesn't need to have a physical operating office now to do business. So ultimately, your team can be very mobile. They can work from home. They can travel straight to their clients from their house. And because Office is now a non-critical tool, you can have your team closer to your client's location. So again, eliminating the physical office and giving them the same level of service regardless. You can even open up those regional offices sooner without having to worry about the physical cost of rent, power, furniture, servers, okay, or worrying about the lease, obviously the long lease that everyone thinks about. So you're asking yourself questions like, what about if I don't make it in the market? That's a lot of expense that I've actually put out. So what this technology gives you, I guess, is the flexibility for your business to scale up, get into that market quicker, or scale back if it doesn't work out. Or on the flip side, if it really does work out, then you can scale it up really quickly or have a smaller office and then get your business up and running. So yeah, look, technology in this case has allowed us to be more connected with our team, with our clients. It's able to allow us to grow fast, gain market share, and have that market present fairly quickly. Now, of course, your team can work on the go at the airport if traveling is still essential. I work at the airport all the time. My plane's delayed, so I can continue business operation without having to actually return to the office. Cafe, the beach. I love working at the beach, get a bit of a tan while I'm at, getting some sales in. So ultimately, it's about working smarter. It's efficient because you're no longer tied to that one location. Travel time is a big thing as well for me, and I'm sure it's for a lot of people out there. So to and from work by car. So again, no more traffic. Your team will be more awake. They'll be happier. I know for a fact I'm a lot more awake and more happier because I'm not sitting in traffic. Better use of my time. So take those morning meetings earlier at home. then drive to work when the traffic's clear. Better yet, drive straight to the client site, and then afterwards to another client site or at the beach and finish my work, and then head home and take the last meeting at home, and I'm not late for the family dinner. Better use of time, more efficient. So ultimately, it just leads to increased productivity, gaining time to finish on projects, or attending another meeting that you would otherwise push, say, tomorrow or the following week. For me, you just bring the sales meeting closer. Traveling, the cost of travel is another big deal. Plane tickets can be quite expensive. I travel a lot, Graham travel a lot, and these are the costs that you could eliminate. And COVID-19 has proven that you can still have the same level of experience with your clients, and without having to physically be there, you can still interact really well with your clients. So gaining more time for myself is a big deal. So saving costs remote, saving costs on going remote, increase efficiency, increase your productivity. Your team is more awake, ultimately a lot happier. That's how I'm finding it myself. But yeah, look, that's just a brief overview of some of the benefits that I've seen myself, as well as what I've seen having a chat with my clients. But of course, there are plenty more out there. So I just want to share just a few of the things that I've seen. All right, so well, look, that's my part anyway. So what I'll do is I'll just hand you over to Graham. He's just going to touch a little bit more on the technology aspects of what I've talked about, sorry. And then we'll head to the questions and answer, and then we'll just wrap it up for the webinar. So over to you, Graham.
Great, thanks, Roland. So just as Roland said, I'm going to carry on from where he left off. We're going to be talking about some of the specific technologies that we'll be using. We're going to focus on some Microsoft technologies. I'm just going to get a couple of things ready quickly. So the main thing we're going to be doing, so what we'll be focusing on is a couple of key products we've got in the Microsoft suite. We're going to be focusing on Microsoft Azure and Office 365. So Microsoft Azure and Office 365. So these are two stablemates of the Microsoft suite. These are pretty core to the platform, and these two products alone can cater for most of your Office requirements. Whilst you still got the option and quite useful option of leveraging other forms of software as a service, like Brian said before previously, maybe you've got your core application, SAP or whatever, may have its own cloud version, maybe using Xero as your finance package. So these are all software as a service systems that allow you to use products in the cloud. So these products, Azure and Office 365, can cater for all those needs, and they can also interact with those other cloud services. So certainly not a one size fits all. So let's start off with Microsoft Azure. What is it? Well, in simple terms, it's cloud service. Servers in the cloud. So you think about the server, that little server you've got under, the accountant's desk in the back corner. If you're in a small office or tucked away in that little server room around the corner, that's what Azure is. It's those servers taken out of your infrastructure and put in the cloud. So that's a nice little fancy graphic, but in reality, this is what you get. This is an enterprise level, multiple hardware, multiple redundancy, just layers of technology. And this is what you're investing in. So you're going from that little server under someone's desk or that comms rack in the back closet through to something like this. So everything is redundant and powered and air conditioned and cooled, multiple internet links, all those sort of things that you could never justify on your side. So that's what you're getting out of the system. So when we look at that, what can you do with that? Let's start with the most basic, and that's you run servers. So you run servers on premise. Maybe you're already using a virtualization platform like Hyper-V or VMware, where you're running multiple servers on a single physical server. That's essentially what Azure is. You're taking servers off infrastructure and you're running virtual servers on high-level infrastructure and lots of it. So you have redundancy in storage, redundancy in capacity. Any server can be taken up there as is. So you can take, if you've got a couple of servers running a host of applications, maybe even Exchange and a few other things, take them all up there, no problem at all. Almost as is, a couple of changes in how you connect to those servers, but functionally it's the exact same technology. So there's guaranteed compatibility that applications will work. Also, it's not tied to Windows. Within the server, the virtual platform, you can run Unix machines. There's a whole host of different platforms. There's different flavors of Unix. There's different other different operating systems up there. So it's not an exclusive Microsoft platform. It is a cloud virtualized platform where you can run nearly any server infrastructure you like. So that's all well and good. You can take servers up there, but that's not using the system or the technology to its most efficient way. We don't have to just use servers. Exchange is a very easy one. You can take that and put that into Office 365 email. No longer need for Exchange server and all the overhead. But there's other components to the Microsoft Azure platform other than just pure server infrastructure, as you're familiar with. We've got things like Azure Blob Storage. So what is Blob Storage? Kind of as its name implies, it's a blob of storage. It's just a big basket of storage with all the technology and computing power laid over the top. So if you're running a traditional file server, you'll have a file server. That server will need memory. That server will need CPU. It'll need capacity to run and load. Microsoft Azure takes that layer away and delivers that and spreads that across 1 million customers. So you're getting a much more efficient file share option without having to have an actual file server. You can connect to those storage locations from an Azure server, from an on-premise server, and I'll touch more on that one shortly. But the other thing you've got is different tiers of storage. So you've got your high-level, high-speed SSD disks. So you've got right down to your little bit slower, low-cost storage for your disaster recovery and your backups and your archiving. Another service you've got there, other than storage as a service, is SQL Azure. So SQL, obviously a database platform. So you can now move your databases without having to build an SQL server. Again, saving complexity and CPU, RAM and all those things you've got to scale up and down for your needs is all handled by the service. And again, spread across 1 million customers, so you're getting the efficiency and the economy of scale. You're not having to pay for that. So one point of note, just to be fair, is that SQL as a service is an enterprise service. So if you're running a little SQL database in SQL Express or something like that, it's not the solution for you. If you're running an enterprise application, maybe you've got a couple of clustered SQL servers, something a bit higher end, something that's really using some complexity, and there's complexity in management and keeping those those clusters up to date and all that redundancy in play. That goes away. With SQL as a service, you literally just create a database, tell it how big you want it, where you want it, what you want to point at it, set your security up, and it's done. You're not monitoring logs and all these other bits and pieces that you need to do to maintain an SQL server. Configure your backups and all those sort of things in the service. You've also got an app service built into Azure. So using its server technology, you can build apps directly into the platform. There's a whole host of APIs and tool sets there to develop apps. It's not a strong point of mine, but it's the capability of the platform that you can develop all sorts of client-facing apps, internal apps, reaching into all the parts of your data. So you might be surfacing up some of your data out of SharePoint using Power BI or something like that and producing reports. Maybe using Dynamics AX or some other parts of the Dynamics suite, and you're trying to bring all that data together and provide it to your staff in an app. There's also some native apps out there that are probably already built on to the Azure service. So there's a lot more to Azure than just file servers. There is actually components of servers that are delivered as a service, like your storage, your SQL, and your app delivery. So just moving back to the Azure blob storage for a moment, there's a cool feature that it's to me it's probably undervalued. We see it very practical in we got a lot of regional clients, sort of clients in the mining and infrastructure sector, and a lot of a big coverage in regional Queensland in particular, and even over in Western Australia. So with that spread of players, we're seeing this is a feature of Azure blob storage that is really powerful. So if we accept the cloud is not the answer to everything, so we've got solutions like SharePoint and OneDrive Teams that allow you to sync files. If you've got large files, as Roland sort of mentioned before, you've got a lot of large files. Maybe you've got multi-office. You've got an office in say regional Queensland near the resources sector, and you've got a head office in Brisbane, or you've got a regional office or a main office in Perth, whichever way your business is structured, you can access the same data. You might have certain resources because they're easier to source in, say, Brisbane, but the data is being generated in Mackay. Using Azure File Sync, you can replicate that data. So you can save that data. We use Mackay and Brisbane as an example. You could have a regional office in Mackay that's close to the coalface. You've got guys going out to the mines. You're collecting, say, 3D server data, scan data for surveys. You're doing a whole heap of CAD drawings and design work. But you've got a crew in Brisbane who are actually doing the engineering and stuff around that. You can be saving them locally, not clogging up your OneDrive. Most laptops these days only have a maximum of 256 gig space on them. Quite often it's 128 these days as well. So being able to sync large amounts of files to OneDrive, which is a one device sync. So it's like a one-to-many. You have a central store and it replicates for every individual device offline. This is a one-to-one. So you have a file server, and any Windows file server can be the client. So you have a Windows file server in my example in Mackay and in Brisbane. You have your point of truth, so your actual file share sits in Azure Blob Storage. This service runs and replicates the data across all those endpoints, and it can be more than two. We've just got two in this example. And then you can allow that data to replicate. There's a little bit of latency based on internet speed and those sorts of things, but when you're working on files, you're working on a file local to you, just like you are now with a local file server at the end of your hall. It's the exact same thing, potentially even the exact same server. No need to upgrade if you've got the capacity. And then you're syncing that data to Azure, so that's your point of truth. You can run backups directly out of Azure to using the Azure backup. We also have a solution that uses AWS, so a completely separate platform, just for complete separation of data. So because it's in the cloud, it's faster. You're not relying on your upload speed. So let's think about your office. Most ADSL, so ADSL dead, but NBN even now, it's still, unless you've got the high-speed synchronous stuff, it's quite often, say, 100 meg down, 25 meg up, or something like that. So that up speed is your limiting factor. If you're pulling a lot of data up, so you're connecting to your data remotely, and that up pipe gets clogged, everything stops. Even you might have 100 meg down, if that 25 up is blocked, nothing will come down because you can't get requests up to pull more data down. And this is not a theoretical experience. I've actually had experience with other troubleshoot scenarios where this has been the exact case. We had a remote site running on 4G, had a whole host of external users as a result of COVID. We decided to remote into that device instead of the central copy of the data they had. Now, just highlight this solution wasn't in place. And that site was brought to its knees because the upload speed was completely consumed. It was a lot less than 25 meg, but either way, it just completely consumed, and it didn't matter they could get 50 meg down. There was nothing happening on that site. So Azure File Share separates that. If you're remote, you can connect straight to a virtual server in Azure and access the same files the guys in Mackay and Brisbane, Perth, Melbourne, Sydney, regional, anywhere. It's the exact same data. So it really creates that offline capability. Is really good for large files. Maybe you don't want to change the way you work. You're comfortable with your file system the way it is, but you want that extra layer of security, redundancy, that cloud backup. It's all there, and this is just native. There's a whole host of other capabilities built around Azure that can deliver similar features, but that's just one I wanted to highlight because I do believe it's an undersold component of the Azure stack. So benefits of Azure in particular: security. Everything Microsoft does is secure, security in mind. They are built from the enterprise. They started with big business and they've branched out and they've got more into SMBs and spreading more into the personal space as well. But that security posture has followed them through the whole process. And I'll touch on a couple of the specific components of that security as we get towards the end of this presentation. Scalability. This is the same for almost any virtual platform. You can scale up and down as needed. So if you think of your traditional sense, say you were starting a new business or you're opening a new office, you would need to purchase a server that catered for your growth for the next 5 years. You would have to have at least the capacity to have components added to cater for that growth, even if it wasn't spec'd out fully on the first day. You've got to buy for what you might get to, not for where you are, because the server lasts for 5 years. You need to make sure it's upgradable, or it's going to be spending that capital a lot more often than you need to. With Azure, you can start off as small as you want. one little tiny server with 4 gig of RAM sitting in the and running your basic app and a couple other things. And then as you grow, as revenue comes in, you start scaling that business up with your business. You're not having to put your hands in your pocket early when the money may not be there. You can expand your business and move into new areas without having to invest heavily in capital. You can use that scalable technology in the cloud. We've got global access, 140 odd data centers around the globe. There's 4 in Australia alone. And these are enterprise level data centers with all with the same level of redundancy and capability, backup data links, the whole lot. Maybe not appealing or relevant to everyone, but if you're traveling overseas or you've got subsidiaries you work with, you can regionalize service to appear in other regions around the globe to enable high speed local access. Hybrid capability, exactly what I spoke about before with the Azure file sync. That's one example of the hybrid capability. There's others, there's products like Databox Edge and a few others that do the same sort of thing, where just because we're saying cloud first, it doesn't mean only cloud. Hybrid is still a real part of your business. There's a lot of legacy apps out there. There's a lot of just heavy applications that just don't play well in the cloud. So Microsoft has catered for that. There is no one's left out. You can literally build around all scenarios and come up with something that'll work for you. Flexibility, an extension of the scalability, but just to do some more sort of finer examples of flexibility. So in addition to being able to scale as your business grows or shrinks, let's say you're a seasonal business. Let's take a tax accountant. You might be flat out from June to October every year and maybe not quite as heavy. Maybe you throw extra staff on that period. Maybe you need more database because everything slows down because there's so much number crunching going on. Well, for that season, you can increase your capacity. Throw an extra couple of CPUs at it, throw another 20 gig of RAM at it. You can do that on the fly to cater for your peaks and troughs. Not in the old school world where you had to buy the maximum capacity, you had to buy the hardware to cater for the maximum load, or maybe you hit the middle and you just had to tolerate the slowness when you got under peak load and then you were still overspending on the rest of it. Well, this you can scale up and down within those seasons, but you can actually go even finer than that. You can go within a day or a week. You might have a particular workload. Maybe it's I don't know, you're doing some sort of marketing and you're bringing in a whole lot of data you need to analyze and crunch, and you do it every 2 to 3 months, but it really does take some effort to crunch that data. Well, you just have a bunch of servers run up and configured but turned off. You're not paying for the compute power while they're turned off. You're not paying for the CPU, you're not paying for the RAM. Maybe you're paying for a bit of storage, you've got a bit of data sitting on there, but you're not paying for any of the capacity of the servers themselves. And then when you have those loads come in, so you've got that chunk of data, you need to process it, you need to rebuild your 3D models, whatever they may be, you turn those servers on, you process that data, you pay by the hour those servers are on, and you shut them down again. There are scripts and tools out there. We can actually scale things up and down throughout the day. So I do know of businesses that do shut down servers over weekends, for example, or after hours. Not a big fan of it myself because you need backup windows and update windows and other things, but there's definitely, for those large workloads where you might have large capacity, certainly makes sense to shut down that capacity when you're not needing it or dial it down. So maybe you just drop RAM off over the weekend and you add it back in during the week when things are picking up. So that's the level of flexibility you have within Azure. So it takes us on to the next component, which is Office 365. 365 is a massive platform now. It encompasses, there's the core of 365, which is pretty much shown in these icons here. But 365 has expanded well beyond what's even there. There's the Dynamics 365. There's a whole host of tools and add-ons and extensions, security and bits and pieces you can add on to the whole Office 365 suite. So if we talk about what 365 is, yeah, most people think of email. Most people say, yep, we moved our business to 365 last year. 9 times out of 10, from experience of people I've been talking to, that means that they move their email to the cloud. They're not using, they're getting all the things in this slide. So yes, in addition to Outlook and Excel, Word and PowerPoint, they're getting Teams, SharePoint, Skype for Business, which has been completely rolled into Teams now, Yammer, OneDrive. They may be using a little bit of OneDrive personally, not so much out of SharePoint. They're using the email, but they're not actually using what they're paying for. And that's the thing. A lot of these, once you pay for a certain level of license, you get all these features. So it's worth even just in your own business having a look at what you are using. If you are saying you've moved to 365, are you using 365? It's all good to say you're there. Are you using everything you're paying for? You could actually get a lot more productivity by actually leveraging the licenses you've already paid for. So let's talk about what's in the Microsoft 365 suite that allows you to take your office everywhere and not be so dependent on that central office. Business class email. We know this is what Microsoft is known for, 365 is known for, it's email. That's the first thing people think. Unless you're a home user where 365 gets misinterpreted as, you know, the office suite that sits on your laptop that you might have picked up from Harvey Norman or something like that. Business class email is really what people know 365 for. And the example I just gave, most people think they've moved to 365 when they moved their email, and they have, but they're not using the full extent of it. But even that email platform, it's grown. So the web version now is nearly as functional, in some areas more functional, in particular search, than the desktop client. It can bubble up important messages. It can highlight stuff. It filters out, you know, you got your junk mail, but now you've got your other. So that's sort of not so important mail, but it's not quite junk. So it can filter out your mail and it work out what's important to you. Search is really, really powerful. You can search through all sorts of things, find all sorts of stuff. And if you use it on the cloud, it's really fast because using the full power of the 365 suite and the Azure servers is effectively that it all sits on. Then we talk about SharePoint. SharePoint, it's many things. So the most common point when people start talking about SharePoint is file storage. They think, right, SharePoint replaces my file server. Yep, that's a fair statement, but it's a fairly limited statement as well. So let's just focus on that component initially. So yes, if we're using it for a pure file storage, maybe a bit of basic document management, we're moving all our files there where maybe we'll store them in folders. You've got much more smarter ways to store your files in SharePoint. You can use tagging, so you can tag documents with client information, maybe some account numbers, maybe some project identifiers. You can use all sorts of additional data you can tag to these things. You can use smarts to tag them too, so you can have anything that drops into a particular library or folder automatically picks up a set of tagging. So that tagging now follows that document wherever it is. And this all leads into search. So this is probably the primary, not primary, this is a really key feature of why you use SharePoint over a file server, apart from the accessibility and the mobility and all those obvious clear things. It's this whole search component. If you've got files in there and you can search by the metadata that we've just spoken about, you can search by the file name, the date it was created, all those sort of common and visible things. A cool feature of search that I like is also the OCRing function. It'll actually OCR the documents, and you can now search the content of the documents, not just the name and the other metadata. So you might remember that this project document had certain statements in it, but you can't remember what job it is or what it might have been called. You can search for those unique identifiers and find that document, or find a bunch of documents that reference the same topic. So I want to find all the documents that reference project 123. You can go and do that. It'll build that list. The other thing is the security. Security in SharePoint is really, really granular, as granular as you'd like it to be, or as open as you'd like it to be. So with that search capacity, that's not just searching. So if you search in Windows, you'll search the folder you're in, or maybe the drive you're in. SharePoint can search everything you have access to at the same time, and you'll only find what you have access to. So if I want to build a list and do a search list, I'll just see what I have access to. I won't be cluttered with all these files that I keep clicking on. They say, no, sorry, restricted access, restricted access. You just won't see them. You can create custom views. So show me all the files that mention this project. Show me all the incident reports from this period. You can build that sort of view into SharePoint and do that. And the other side of SharePoint is obviously being a web-based platform. You can use it. It naturally lends itself to intranets. So that's your corporate location for your business, where all your data can sit, and it's accessible outside of your office. So your intranet's not sitting in your office; it's sitting in the cloud. People at home can access their leave forms. They can access the latest company information and announcements. They can access all the controlled documents. Maybe they need to pull down the latest contract template or incident reporting form or whatever it may be. All that controlled documents can be there, and there can be flows and things built into that. So let's just move on to that smart flow component of it. So Microsoft Flow is built into it within the Microsoft suite. And there are a whole heap of other platforms that take it to another level, such as Nintex, that can actually integrate with a whole host of external packages as well as internally, and really improve the user experience. But just staying within the Microsoft stack for now, you can build basic workflows around document management. Might be a leave request form. The flow in this example is a document that needs to be approved. It goes through a reviewing phase and pending and then approved. The advantage of using these workflows, apart from the obvious, the data now flows from point A to point B and no steps are missed, you can now identify where the bottlenecks in your flows. So why is it always taking 2 days for a simple approval to happen? And then you realise that, take this example, we've got a sales manager in the middle who has to review and approve it. That sales manager's on the road 24, every day of the week. Maybe they're only checking their email every couple of days because they're on the road so much. They don't have access, and they're in the flights, they're traveling and around about. So you identify you've got that single sales manager who's your point of weakness in that flow, and as a result, these flows that should take a few hours are taking 2 to 3 days. But you now see that, and it's very clear where that delay is at, because you can see certain steps being actioned really quickly and one's being actioned really slowly. You can then put workarounds, add additional people in there, maybe remove that step altogether or make it a non-essential step, or build some other components into that. But you can see how your business is flowing and get reports on where these things are working. Good processes that lend themselves, anything that's sort of structured, leave request gets lodged, goes through, generates an email to the line manager who says, yep, I'm happy for that person to be away for that week. Then goes to HR, who then goes, yes, I'm happy that they've got enough leave in the bank. And then the approval goes back and the leave's booked into the calendar, it all goes through. No one has to pass paper around the office. There's no filling in forms. There's no email trail. And, yes, Jack approved it and he's gone and that's moved around. It's all tracked. It's all timed. There's no, you can't hide at all. You say I approved that before, and there's a timestamp when you actually did approve it. So it's good for accountability as well. So Teams, Microsoft Teams for me, it's becoming the golden boy of the 365 stack. So where 365 email was people think of 365, they thought of email. For me, Teams is quickly becoming that primary source. It's obviously a meeting platform. People are using it a lot now for meetings. NHS in the UK have just bought 1.5 million licenses to enable their entire staff to collaborate more effectively. And globally, it's taken off through COVID. And it's because it's so dynamic and flexible. But what is key about Teams is it's built on SharePoint. It's rolled in the benefits of Skype, and it integrates with Outlook and then with email systems and everything else. So it has a chat platform. You can invite people in. You can have individual workspaces for projects or for departments. It is flexible and scalable. You can have room devices. You can have individual personal devices. You can use features such as interactive whiteboard. And we touch a lot more on this detail in our previous webinar if you'd like to jump on our website and have a look. But the point is, Teams is a really powerful tool for you guys to have a look at. And we've got online document storage. As it says, built on SharePoint. So document management is native to it. SharePoint is the underlying engine. Access from anywhere, sharing externally, all those things are built into it. The cool thing you've got is co-authoring. So Roland and I do this quite frequently. I'm in Mackay and Roland's in Brisbane. Both logging into the same documents, working on it collaboratively. You can see what each other's doing, get notifications when someone's changed something. All that information is there. So, and we can do that locally. So I can click the open in browser and open in my local application. So I'm sitting in Word on my computer in real time, synchronizing with someone else in a different location. There might be slight delays with the internet speeds and things like that, but we're interacting the exact same document and updating it. And we use this frequently within our teams all over the place. So it is a very, very powerful tool that we use all the time. We have chat meetings. Like I said, we covered this pretty well in our last webinar, but it is a core functionality, and it's probably the one that's getting the most traction and visibility in the workplace out there. But quickly, it's becoming a small part of what the platform is. It's so much more than that. Shift and task management. So there's task manager, there's a shift manager. These are just a couple of tools that are built natively into Teams. You can manage shifts and schedules and invite your team members into them. No more emailing out shift lists and saying this is it, or putting on the notice board and them not getting the update that, hey, your shift changed. They can respond and interact with the shifts remotely, notify they can't make a shift, interact and communicate with their line managers and all these things. This is just one example. It may not be 100% relevant to your business, but this is an example of what you can do in Teams. In addition, so this is what's already there that Microsoft have provided. In addition to that, you can actually build apps on top of Teams, and maybe there's a solution that you can tweak for your own business. It's going to really take your business to the next level. So Dynamics 365. So this is a whole other component, and this is outside of the Office 365 that you're probably familiar with. Over the last 15 years or so, Microsoft have been busy buying up all sorts of companies and rebranding them under the Dynamics brand, and gradually interacting and building in interactions and components that are trusting on each other, obviously making them 100% compatible with the whole 365 suite, back-ending them onto SharePoint, natively opening Word and Excel directly out of these applications. They now have a product stream for nearly every market sector you can think of. Field service, you can deploy a field service module that helps you do timesheeting on the go, filling in job sheets on the client site and updating things while you're out and about using a tablet or a mobile phone app. You've got marketing tools, you've got HR, talent scouting and management, you've got finance and operations. There's a whole retail sector with a point of sale component built into it. And it's fully scalable. We use Dynamics CRM, for example, and we use it way more than just a simple CRM. We use it for keeping track of project management time and things like that. So there is a whole host of tools and features that you can leverage, and it's not like a SAP jump in and spend all this money. You can pick and choose the modules you want to engage in, and and find the parts that work for your business. Maybe you can get away with just using CRM and running that for your business, or maybe you want to add the field service component so you can deliver some other services. Maybe you need the financial module, maybe you don't. Maybe you want to add the HR module, maybe you want the HR module on its own. There's all sorts of components that you can run individually, and it's made up of a bunch of different products and platforms, and that mesh between products is becoming closer and closer every day. So in addition to your standard software as a service platform, you may already have your existing vendor may already have a platform. If you haven't and you're looking at something in the cloud, or maybe you've got an on-prem system that you're ready to renew, it's worth having a look at Dynamics 365 and seeing if there's a fit there that can help take the dependence on your business on the office away and allow you to work more readily in the cloud. So just tying that together, a key thing about, and I mentioned at the start of this, is security. Microsoft, being an enterprise-first platform, is really key on security. Two-factor authentication, multi-factor authentication is an integral part, and to me, an essential part of any business's security strategy. And Microsoft has spread it across the entire 365 suite. That includes your Dynamics suites, includes Azure, and includes all the 365, email, SharePoint, all those sort of things. Single authentication through the MFA. You can either use an app on your phone, you get an SMS, a phone call, a whole lot of different ways you can do that. The whole point of it is, if, say you're one of these people, which is nearly all of us, we like to use the same usernames and passwords in a host of different places. You've used it in your favorite shopping site, and then you read it up the next day that they were hacked overnight and all their data and email address and passwords has been stolen. Straight away, they're trying to hack in 365. They straight away try those credentials in 365. If you're one of those people who's got the same address, password, maybe your company password policy is not strong enough, it's not changing frequently enough, or maybe they've just been able to look at that password and go, right, let's add a 1 on the end and see if we can hit it. And let's face it, a lot of us do that. They're smarter than that. That's how they get in. Without your phone, without your details, without your fingerprint, whatever it is you've set up as your multi-factor authentication, they can't get into your system. So yes, you want to protect your data and be smarter with passwords and have work passwords and personal passwords and all those sort of things. But you also need to, this two-factor authentication is the real important layer. We've run it across our entire business. We encourage all our clients to do it. It is a real strong part of the security platform. And the best thing is it's singular, it's across everything. There's even APIs in Azure where you can actually roll that MFA into other packages that actually support the technology. So you might have an external application that can use your two-factor authentication to authenticate against those devices. So it can actually go beyond Microsoft. Then you got the Windows Defender, the whole Microsoft ATP, the advanced threat protection. The most common one we use is in the email side of things. So within 365, there's a whole, it is an add-on, but there's a whole layer of security layer over the top that adds another layer of filtering, security, protection. And this is what can protect your data. At the cloud level, there's a whole tool set there to get a whole bunch of reports and visibility, intrusion attacks. You can do some search and all sorts of things. You also can deliver with the Microsoft 365 stack, you can deliver the Microsoft Defender. So Defender, when it first came out, was something Microsoft gave away for free just so that you had an antivirus if you didn't invest in one, and it was about as valuable as anything you'd expect that was for free. That's changed. It's there is still a free component, but it's now a paid add-on or built into the enterprise features of the platform, and there's now a fully integrated, advanced security platform. Does that mean you shouldn't use other platforms? No, definitely not. The more layers you have, the more secure you are. But it's no longer just a free layer just to have just in case. It's now an enterprise level security platform that touches on the whole scope of what Microsoft has to offer. So that for me sums up the key technologies I want to talk through. So we had, the Azure platforms, servers, files, blob storage, SQL, app building, Office 365, email, SharePoint, Teams, Dynamics 365. So these are tools in the Microsoft stack alone. Now, there's a whole host of others out there that you may already be using, or maybe they're already compatible with your existing applications. So we're certainly not saying Microsoft is the only option. We're just using these as an example because of our relationship with Microsoft, obviously. But one, it doesn't preclude us. We use AWS, for example, as a alternate archive location, and it works really efficiently for us. Whatever works for you. You may have a software vendor that has a platform. Maybe their platform runs on AWS. Maybe it's a Google platform. Whatever it is, we really strongly recommend you have a look at cloud and see where you can move your business to the cloud. We're not talking about shutting down your offices and moving everything to the cloud. We're just saying give yourself the option. Move to the cloud, no longer be dependent on that office, allow your staff to be more mobile, give yourself the opportunity to grow where you want to grow, moving into new market segments, open that regional office, maybe scale back, maybe drop a floor of your building, or move closer to your clients and move into the city in a smaller office where you're in a better location and don't need quite as much space because your staff are now out in the field earning you more money instead of sitting on your floor wearing out your carpet. So that's my recommendation there. So just thank you all for joining. As Roland said, we'll be sharing a video of this with anyone who's attended or registered. It'll be going up on our website. We may even look at running this one and others again into the future. So if you've got any questions, feel free to drop them into the questions window and we'll run through them from there. So just...
Hey Graham, I think there's a few questions in there. Do you want me to read a few out?
Yeah, so if you want to run through them, Roland, and I'll jump in if we need to.
One of them is in regards to the flow. It's quite fascinating. Is it part of the Office 365 or is there an additional cost to it?
So Flow is built into 365. It is part of the platform. And it requires a little bit of configuration to do some fancy stuff, but out of the box, there's a lot of simple flows you can do yourself. Like some of that simple flow that we showed up there is pretty much out of the box with some minimal training and a bit of experience, right through to some really targeted and interactive stuff into other areas. So.
Cool. You talked about with the Microsoft Azure in regards to Linux OS as well as Linux operating systems and all that. Can that run in Azure?
100%. That's, you can run Unix, Linux. There's a whole host of flavors of Linux that are available to be run in Azure. I believe there's Red Hat and a few others that you may be familiar with that will run up there. We're talking to clients who have some, I won't say outdated, but some finance systems that have been built in Linux or Unix, and they're not going to change anytime soon. And those systems we can literally virtualize and take as they stand straight into the cloud, and give them a whole host. And just on that, another thing we've found when you go to the cloud, if we go back to that picture I showed of the servers and the racks, the quality of the hardware you're getting in the cloud is much higher than obviously what most people would buy in their office. You know, you generally get what you pay for, and they all might look the same on the outside and have the same coloured lights, but there's a lot more going on the inside, and the data, the hardware is tuned to deliver a certain output. So what we've found is, if you run a certain spec on premise and it's performing just for you, you can generally go the same or even sometimes a little bit less and get the same performance just because of the quality of the hardware it's running on. So that's something to realise, that you may overspec on premise. So you might have 32 gig of RAM in your server just because you think you need it. You might get away with 16 on the cloud and save yourself a bit of money. And still have the option to throw 32 at it when you have those big days where you need to run that extra data.
One more question. It's regarding SharePoint versus Azure or file server. What's the difference? If SharePoint can be used as a file document management, why use Azure?
The biggest thing is probably size. So SharePoint for me is the preference because of the power you've got in SharePoint. You can put a lot of data up there. You can build workflows around it. You can use the metadata and the search features. Where Azure, and you've got OneDrive for offline capability, so it does tick all the boxes, but it comes down to size. So OneDrive is a personal sync tool, whereas the Azure file sync example I shared before is an office sync tool. So you're syncing the whole data set to your office, not to your laptop. So it means it can be much larger. You can have a server with a couple of terabytes of storage syncing data from Azure. So if you've got large files, which if you've got to open them on the cloud every day, or they're going to fill up your hard drive real quick, Azure is a much better place to run it. Maybe you've got a custom application that needs a file share. You can still do that and use Azure to get it there. And the other key is, once it's in Azure, and we see this a lot with engineering again, where we might have clients who are, say, developing a lot of engineering and drafting type drawings and moving them into the cloud. Well, we can move them up so they can have them there, work on them locally, sync them to Azure, and then from Azure move them to SharePoint. Now remember that SharePoint is on the same server infrastructure as Azure. So moving data from an Azure storage to SharePoint is much faster than you uploading it from your own location. So if you're one of these businesses, maybe you have your in development, so you're designing something, you're building it, you're using all that in the file share. Once it's finalized, you put it into a project site or a client portal or something like that. Much faster to move it from Azure straight into SharePoint than from on-prem. So they really do complement each other, but the biggest trigger there is size.
Cool. I think that's pretty much it in terms of questions.
So there's been a couple more that I'm just picking up here. So, where are Microsoft Teams documents stored? SharePoint. It's that simple. Microsoft Teams is built on SharePoint. It has a file storage area. It's built on SharePoint. It actually creates a SharePoint site off the back of it. So if you're familiar with SharePoint, how that works, that's how Teams work. And the other question I've just seen come through is, can SharePoint replace my network share? Yes. Want to keep it simple? Yes, it can. It's with the OneDrive, you can have all the local features of having that file locally. I actually find I don't use OneDrive that much. I'm using it out of the cloud more often than not and using the open and local version. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. So, yeah, there's a whole heap of other things there. So, it's pretty powerful.
Alrighty. I think that's it. Unless there's more coming through. No. Alrighty, so I guess that's the end of the webinar, really. First, yeah. So look, I just want to say thank you so much to everyone who attended today. Really do appreciate it. Yeah, look, I hope that we do. I hope that you find this webinar very useful and informative. Again, this webinar is actually recorded, so we will send it out to everyone who attended. And please feel free to share it with anyone who might find this very useful. As Graham also noted down that we may do this one again, but also please just keep an eye out for future webinars. We are planning to do this more on a regular basis. But without further ado, I'd like to just close this webinar and say thank you again. And till next time, thank you again.
Thanks, everyone.